Each day, more and more people are listening to music on Spotify, and that's also true for podcasts. Next time you're on the Spotify app, make sure to follow Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. Enjoy listening to Lou, his incredible guests, and all of the amazing episodes. Listen, follow, and share. Thrive Loud on Spotify.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been to the Great Wall of China. I have seen the pyramids of Egypt. I even witnessed a grown man satisfy a camel. But never in all my years as a sportscaster have I witnessed something as improbable, as impossible as what we've witnessed here today. It's Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Hey, Thrive Loud listeners, Lou Diamond here. Hope you're enjoying your summer, July 2020. And we had a great week here at Thrive Loud. A lot of fun guests. Going back to last Sunday, Carla Malden, Search Heartache, that was pulled from Bedside Readings, Authors and Thrive. We had Julianne Sullivan from my conversation with her. We talked about the culture puzzle. She's so enjoyable and so much fun. And a great conversation, the outfluencer, Dr. Wayne Purnell. Wayne is great, charming, has a great way of thinking of things, an amazing coach. Great listen. Go check that out. And that's episode number 485. Today, we go all the way south of the border, all the way down to South America. My conversation with Ivan Obolensky. And he has his first book, Eye of the Moon, coming out. And this was pulled from Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode and conversation with Ivan Obolensky here on Thrive Loud.
Welcome to Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive, a podcast show that provides you exclusive access to top writers around the globe and how they are thriving through their writing, their passions, and their lives. Here's your host, Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive, connecting you to amazing authors that are thriving through their work and in their lives each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today, we have a man that grew up regaled by tales of his aristocratic and trailblazing ancestors while surrounded by high society. He was inspired at an early age by intrigue, mystery, and adventure. He brings his love of storytelling to his writing. In his first book, Eye of the Moon, his first novel. So please welcome from Montevideo, Uruguay, Ivan Obolensky. Ivan, how are you today?
I am well. Thank you, Lou, for having me on this.
I'm excited for two reasons. One, before we hit record, you had enough energy and coffee streaming through you from your South American home that I was eager to get going and excited to connect you to our listeners here. But also excited because I don't think we've had on Authors That Thrive someone from South America. So welcome. We love connecting to different continents.
There you go. And thank you.
So Ivan, I want to rewind a little bit. We'll get to Eye of the Moon, but I want to learn a little bit about you. Can you give almost a little bit of your fast forward career story of what your life has been about? Obviously, because this was not, you didn't come out of the womb writing novels. So I want to understand a little bit about your life so our listeners can better connect to you.
Sure. I used to write when I was a kid and I used to write for, the school papers and stuff like that. But I really put that aside for quite a time. I was in the financial area for a long time, and that was toxic to me, to be perfectly blunt. I learned a lot, but it really wasn't quite what I wanted. I had to rearrange my life. I did. I met my wife, and she has a translation company. And of course, I had to figure out, well, what are we going to do? And she said, well, you talk a lot of stuff. So, write it down and give me 2,000 words every month or so. And I'll translate them in Spanish to, to showcase our skills because we have corporate clients and things like that. And you can put them on, eventually we started with language and then we did it to anything. And that was a really brilliant thing because I had to take complex ideas and distill them into pieces that people could A, understand, and B, because they were translated, they had to be particularly clear. So I had to really learn to write, to focus, and then of course I had deadlines, which I loved, and I just thrived on that. And after a time, I said, I've always wanted to write this story. I love stories. That was one. Actually, it was Allende. Isabel, who actually really clued me in on this. I went to one of her lectures, and she was talking about how she was doing an interview. She was originally a journalist, I think, with Noriega or whatever, and she was the poet. And she wrote this piece, and he saw it, and he sat there and says, "What are you doing? This is the worst piece of crap I've ever seen. What are you thinking? You shouldn't be a journalist. You should be a novelist, because," and she said, "You just lie." And of course, and Isabella, when she was saying this, she says, it was the most amazing thing because I realized that, I tend to exaggerate things, and I could do that. And if I wrote, and I could just make things up. And I took one of my worst attributes and turned it into an extraordinary good thing. And that happened to be, I sat in that audience. There are times, in every speaker, and I'm sure you have had that instance where you hope at one point to have connected to one of these people that might change the world or change like life as they know it. And that happened. And I was just gobsmacked. I just couldn't believe it. It was just one of the greatest things I'd ever seen. I could take one of my worst attributes. I was very good at sales, which tells you something. But I said,
"Well, it means you could tell it." Actually, I do understand that. It means you could tell a story, and that's and that isn't natural or akin to everybody. So the ability to do that obviously was always inside of you, whether it was, it's cool that you were able at least to distinguish that was kind of a little bit of your superpower.
Yes. And I do believe in that. And I think that's also, how I write is very different from how most people write, I think.
So what do you mean? How is it different?
Well, I think there's two ways. One, I finally sort of figured out what I do, and I learned that from Stephen King. He talked about, using situations to, I guess, evolve a plot. You create a peculiar situation, like what would it be like for a person to talk to a god? Just as a situation. Or, you're in the morgue and, the body bag starts to move. And, you go, whoa. Everything follows from that. And then I also borrowed a couple of ideas from, the ancient Greeks, which was they had tended to have their plays happen in a 24-hour period. I restricted my action to only 5 days. So whatever was going to happen had to happen within 5 days. And that meant that my people had to really get on with it. And that was important. So creating the situation, and the situation was I grew up, and again, to sort of, I guess, to give you a little bit on the novel, I grew up in we went to vacations at my father's place in Rhinebeck, which was this large.
In upstate New York.
Yeah. Right next to the. Matter of fact, it was right down the way from the Astor place because actually Vincent, who was my uncle, built it for my grandfather and my grandmother, Alice Astor. And there was even a little train that went between the two places.
Very cool.
Go figure. Oh, I know. Very cool. Very strange place. Very creepy. Very, but, marvelous. And there was always, ghosts. We used to have nannies would never stay there more than one summer because they would just, I don't know what happened. They would meet my grandmother or something, Now, of course, I was a kid and I sat there and said, I'd love to see a ghost. I tried and tried and tried. I never did. But, and I figured, it was the adults, somehow something about adults. They were able to, either their imaginations or through their fears, they were able to, come in contact with things that were apparitions and things like this. And but anyway, I use that as a backdrop just because the setting was so perfect. And we had butlers and strange things, and it was great. And so I said, you gotta do something with this. And then of course my grandmother she died reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I mean, I found this out at the St. Regis when my father was talking about this. I would see him. My mother and my father were divorced, so we would only see them. I would see my father at lunch, of course, and of course it would be the St. Regis because my grandfather was pretty much redid that and made it into the great hotel it is.
So let's give the listeners that view. Your when we say obviously the tale of this trailblazing ancestors, was architecture, that was who your grandfather was, right?
No, he was into hotels. He was a Russian prince. He escaped from Russia. He was in World War I. He was, did pretty well in there. And then eventually he moved to London. He was a stockbroker. He met Alice Astor. They fell in love. Lady Ribblesdale, her mother, hated him. But Alice was her own sort of person, and she said, no, I'm marrying this guy. That didn't last, of course, so maybe the mom was right. But anyway, they eventually, Vincent and he got together, and Vincent had all these hotel properties in New York. And so, and since, Serge, my grandfather, knew a lot about service and what was right and what was wrong, he said, well, Serge, why don't you do something with this? So he did. He took the Maxfield Parish, Old King Cole thing, put it in, the painting, and put it in the St. Regis, and started to redo the whole hotel, so that people from Europe would say, this is a pretty damn good hotel. And so it was great. And then he took all these people who had from Russia who were really good at service, and he had them immigrate over there, and he put them in charge of various parts of the hotel, and that worked out very well. And then he did that with the Sherry Netherlands, and I think he did that with the Plaza. He did a bunch of stuff, and he was very good at it. So
and you were directly named after him, right? That's your namesake.
My namesake is my dad. My dad, but he was called Ivan. Okay, I was called Ivan, and then Serge was my grandfather, and so things were pretty I suppose cushy, although it wasn't. You have to learn how to talk at an early age and also be seen and not heard, which was exciting because sometimes you would be sat at the dinner table, and all these really lights would be talking, and you couldn't say anything, but you could pick up stuff. And of course, we would try and steer the conversation because my brother and my sister are onto, the ghosts and the heritage and all the good stuff, all the scandal. And, and we would, eventually get back together, and we would put notes together on all this of what really happened to, Aunt Blah-de-blah. And did that person really die? And anyway, my grandmother was very much into Egyptology. She, collected quite a number of things. And so this was pretty exciting. And then, of course, he told me that, she died reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I thought that was pretty extraordinary. Right. Actually, was a W magazine article. It said, she may have been murdered. And this was, this was fantastic. I said, I can't even believe that. I mean, I don't know what these people are, what are they writing? Where do they get these ideas?
So I guess this is interesting. I don't want to use the word eclectic because that's not the right word, but this just historical family, a unique childhood to grow up with, a career not necessarily what you wanted to necessarily do, wasn't the right environment for you. It eventually led you, obviously, as we are fast forwarding up to what we are today, to want to tell a story. Why was this the story you wanted to tell?
That's a good question. I think it's because, again, you got to look at it from the viewpoint of a situation. I mean, was my grandmother murdered? I mean, that's an interesting thought. Now, is it plausible? Is it possible? How could it have been? And how do you take many of the stories which my grandfather and my father told me, you weave these in, and that was really an important element of it. So you have to take many diverse things. And this novel, I wanted it to be, actually, people called it a Gothic mystery, which, was a surprise to me, but that is actually what it is. And, but I didn't want the typical English one. I could do that, I suppose, but, it had to be about business, because you see, as, Calvin Coolidge said, the business of America is business, and it is. And so this has a very much a business element, even though it has a lot of sort of, I guess, mystical elements also involved. And so that was very exciting. And I thought I would amalgamate a lot of this and put in many different threads. And that's what I did. And it was fascinating. And I didn't have any plot, which was really exciting, because I didn't even have an outline for a plot. I just started to write. And it is rather a complex story. And it was really great, because I love doing this, is connecting dots and holding a giant fabric in my mind of all these interweaving parts, and being able to put that down on paper. And it took about, 3 years to write or whatever. But, again, I didn't write all the time. There's no way. I'd go mad. I need other work. I can't do this. Otherwise, it's like you get set adrift. When you write, you go off into your own world, and there you are. And nobody can contact you. And particularly when things get really, really bad in the plot sense, you paint yourself into absolutely horrendous corners. And David Mamet was always saying, well, that's the whole job of a writer. He's got to be smart enough to get you out of that. I mean, how is the author going to work this out? Well, that's the genius. And that's what you have to have in some regards. And so
I want to talk about tapping into your genius. So obviously, let's ask the writing process. Are you this disciplined writer where you set a schedule and you want to sit down and put these ideas together? Or is it as haphazard as possible? And you're laughing. I think I got the answer.
You think I'm going to sit down? No, actually, there's first things first. The first thing is the work. Okay, so if I've got a job to do, I do that. I read an awful lot. And if I'm not reading, I'm writing. And I think that's one of the key things that also is really important. A good writer has to read, has to have read everything. And, if they don't know what the talent is. And also you get ideas, you put that together. My process is, I'm very much in the classics. I was classics trained. I did Latin for 6 years. My only upset with the whole thing was I didn't learn ancient Greek. That was bad. I mean, I would have liked to have done that, but I didn't. So I was stuck with Latin. But that had its benefits too. So I go with the old world view of a muse. And that is, you get a sort of a inspiration. And that's all I ask for every day, is I want inspiration, and that my ideas come easily and well. Now, funnily enough, the ideas come, but actually putting that into words is not so easy sometimes. Sometimes it flows, smooth as silk. Many times it doesn't. I write chapter by chapter, like driving across the country at night. You can only see as far as your headlights. I have no idea what's going to happen. The characters go off plot all the time. You know what I mean? You have no idea. And then they say things and you go, what am I going to do with that? And but if you have faith in it, what happens is it all comes together. It is so weird. And it's really mentally, it fries you a bit. I have to go running at that point. I used to run in the hills of Glendale, you run and run and run. That's all you can do. And until something comes. And I remember one time I passed a black crow feather on the ground, and I go, whoa, what is that? I've never seen one of those before, at least around here. And I go, that's either very good or very bad. Well, I went and I kept running, and then all of a sudden I got the brilliant idea of how I got myself out of this corner, and it was just great. And I went back and I got the feather, and I still have it, and it's phenomenal. But that's how I write. I wanted surprise, and I'm as surprised as the reader.
It's interesting. You write how you speak. You're covering multiple angles, many different topics simultaneously, weaving it together, and somehow it comes together coherently. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird?
You mentioned running. I love asking guests on the program this question, Ivan. When you have trouble thriving, like you're stuck, not only writing, but just in life, what practice do you seek or individual do you seek out to help get yourself back on the thriving track?
Well, I do two things. If it's a mental sort of situation, I'm either ride my motorcycle and go off and get some thrills and chills, or I run. And I used to do a lot of triathlons. Part of it was as a handling for stress. When you're in the financial markets, you tend to get that. So triathlons and marathons were my thing. So I'd run an awful lot, and that tended to calm me. I would sit there and just focus on my breath, focus on my running, focus on my pace, and, sometimes listen to loud music. And I'd really like that. And I'd usually have the same track going over and over. Martha and the Muffins. Okay, don't ask me why, but that's what it was. Martha and the Muffins set my pace, and I would know where I was, and how fast I was going simply because that particular track would come up and that musical phrase would happen. It was really funny, but that's how I did it. And that's how when you have to thrive, most people have agendas. Okay, now this may sound weird, but they have agendas. So what they do is they focus on what they're trying to do. But my belief is that life will tell you what it wants. Most people never bother to ask because they never sit down and actually listen to life, because life tells you all the time what it wants from you. And if you don't recognize it, it's because you're so focused on what it is you're doing. And, you have an agenda. And frankly, the amount of information that you have, even if we look to it from a scientific view, and you look at the world outside, the state space outside is far vaster than your little world inside could possibly be. There's no way to do a one-to-one correspondence on that. So the better information is on the outside. And so what you need to do is, and I did this by actual test, it was the most grueling, horrible thing I think I've ever done, was to let events take their course.
I like it.
Oh my gosh. No, try it sometime, particularly if you're a complete control freak like I was.
Ivan, I do. I have you on this podcast. I'm just letting it go.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's what happens. It's really weird. You got to let stuff go. You've got to let things take their course and just watch. And all of a sudden you find that opportunities surround you.
Very true.
And, and it's really strange. And if you do that in your writing, to get back to that, that's what you got to do. You've got people in your mind. Well, they say things. They're characters. They do things. And you've got to let them be and live. And they do things. And now the only thing, that's why you have to cut them off, though. And the only way to do that is to give them only so much time to do whatever they're going to do. So, they have to get busy.
That is the best segue we've had, Ivan. Look forward to cut them off when they can. Here's what I want to ask you. Is there another book or novel brewing between your ears?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm 3/4 of a way through it. It's the sequel, and it happens only a week after or 2 weeks after the first one.
Oh, great.
And it's one of those things. What I love is how you can look at something one way, and then all of a sudden you see it in a totally different light. Everything changes. Your assumptions, you just have to throw them out. You just sit there and go, what the heck happened? And those are, those moments of synchronicity. Jung used to go into that quite a bit. And they're fabulous. And this is what makes life amazing. It's the emergence that comes out. I did a lot of science. I also, believe it or not, I did a lot of physics, a lot of statistics, a lot of math, and complexity theory was a thing for me. And I've woven all these elements into this novel. You'll not be able to see them on the surface, but if you know what you know, you'll see that they're there.
Ivan Obolensky, this has been an honor and a pleasure and a treat. And I hope you were doing well down in South America. The listeners we have are global here, so this is great that we're connecting to it, and truly a pleasure to have you on Authors That Thrive.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Lou.
Thank you for listening to Authors That Thrive, brought to you by Bedside Reading. To learn more about today's guest, head on over to bedsidereading.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, or follow us everywhere on social media at Bedside Reading.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com. Follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Thrive Loud. Check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.